What's up, YouTubers? Fred and Scott here with our second run at episode 56. We're going to talk a little bit about the Orioles flying the coop, the Ravens Hall of Fame game and induction, and a summed up version of episode 56. Stay tuned. You thought we'd start the show off like that? Birdland BS. Check it out. What's going on, Birdland BSers? Fred and Scott here.
What's up?
We're going round 2 on episode 56. Going to try to give you the Cliff Notes version of what we went through a little while ago. So we apologize. We had some technical difficulties with the live stream earlier tonight, and we had a bunch of issues with the live stream on Facebook as well. But we hit 100 subscribers today on YouTube. So we appreciate each and every one of you, especially all the new followers coming over from Engraven, and other sources, wherever you guys are coming from. We appreciate each and every one of you. We just figured we'd hop on here, go live with you guys, and kind of give you a little bit of some insight on some of the topics that we talked about earlier today on Facebook.
Yeah, if you want to check it out too, just, unfortunately, the bigger problem was on YouTube, unfortunately. But we've actually worked out the kink. That's why we're getting on here so late. So we worked out the kinks that we were having, the issues that we were having. But go check out the full podcast that we did on Facebook Live. We go a lot more in depth than we're going to be able to go here on YouTube. But we do promise we will be live next week. No problems. We've got it all 100% worked out. Knock on wood. Everybody pray for us. Nothing breaks.
All right, let's hop right into this thing. So I know generally speaking, YouTubers out there, you guys have been a pretty big Ravens audience, but we are a coverall Baltimore show. So we're going to hop into some of the biggest news kind of in Baltimore right now, and that surrounds the Orioles team. As bad as they are, they've been playing better baseball since the All-Star game, have won 4 of their last 5. Jonathan Scope had been tearing the cover off the ball lately.
They've scored 62 runs in the last 9 games, by the way.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Scope, just talking about him, he had been named AL Player of the Week recently. He's batting .368 with 9 home runs, 6 in a 7-game stretch. Would have had 7 and 7 if he wasn't robbed of that home run.
Yeah, but it was a close one, that's for sure.
But speaking of Jonathan Scope, so the big news surrounding the Orioles, there have been a multitude of trades, obviously starting last week with the Manny Machado deal, then going to L.A., then we had the Britton deal going to New York. We also had earlier this week, which we have not talked about, Brad Brock going to Atlanta for some compensation for international money.
Yep.
And then recently today, we lost a couple other members. So we had, in a deal with Atlanta, Kevin Gosman and Darren O'Day going over to Atlanta for a bundle of prospects and some more international money.
A lot more international money.
Right. Then we rounded out the trade deadline at 4 p.m. today with a deal with the Brewers sending Jonathan Scope in, which is kind of a head scratcher for me. Wasn't a real big haul. I would have expected to get more back from Jonathan Scope. But Scott, take us down a rundown of your early impressions of these 2 big trades.
The Scope, you hit the nail on the head. The Scope trade is a head scratcher. You get rid of a guy who's a pretty daggone good second baseman, right? For lack of better wordage. But you get back a guy that's okay in the infield in Jonathan Millar. He's a major leaguer. But then you also get back minor leaguer right-handed pitcher Luis Ortiz and minor league shortstop Jean Carmona. Ortiz is 3 for 4 through 16 games so far this year. He started 11. He's got two saves so far this year. He's only pitched 16 innings with a 3.71 ERA and a 1.19 WHIP. Not great, not horrible. We've
Still a
seen worse.
small sample size, but
Yeah,
take it for what it's worth.
I think all that was in Double-A as well.
Right.
And then Carmona has a 239 average in 39 games with 155 at-bats, a 298 OBP, and a 705 OPS. Oh, and I forgot the stat that I hate the most, 45 strikeouts in those 155 at-bats.
Yeah, that's a little alarming, especially with a team that already has enough problems with that as it is.
That's almost 1 out of every 3 at-bats a guy's striking out.
Yeah, that's an issue.
It's a huge issue. The other big trade, obviously, being the Gausman. Guess who Gausman went with? Darren O'Day. And yes, that was last second with the Darren O'Day.
Just to kind of sum it up for you guys, he was thrown in there basically as a salary dump. Saves the Orioles a little over $4 million for the remaining of this season, and then $9 million in guaranteed money for next year. So Darren O'Day wasn't in there to entice them to throw any more prospects our way. That was more of just a salary dump.
Yeah. DB misses our other camera angle, by the way. Yeah, unfortunately, we're just going this route because of the technical difficulties. That camera angle will be back next week. We promise that.
Absolutely.
But the other pieces to this are picking up Evan Phillips, right-handed pitcher, Giancarlos Encarnacion, who's an infielder, catcher Brett Cumberland, and left-handed pitcher Bruce Zimmerman, plus the $2.5 million in international slot money. A great deal of international slot money considering what we got out of it. But I think a good portion of that is because Gausman is controllable for the next, I believe, 2 years.
Yeah. Now this deal I'm not as upset with. I think this deal actually returned a good amount of prospects and some decent prospects. You got to look. Atlanta Braves are stocked. I mean, they are loaded at the minor league level. So we ended up walking away with a couple of good prospects. Again, like we talked about earlier, they're still early in their development. These are some high A and some double-A guys that are still a few years away. But we did get some potential major league talent from there. But the bigger thing, like you said, the bonus money that we get, that's going to go a long way in enticing some international players to come here to Baltimore, which is a market that we haven't been in a very long time.
International players don't like coming here.
Well, not only that, but I mean, the Angelos family, or Peter, to really be blunt with it, has kind of been adamant about it in the past that international players and the international market was something that they didn't want to tap into. Now that tide seems to be changing. At least that's the word we're hearing from Dan Duquette. So we'll see. Orioles are in a good spot right now with their international money.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I have to say about this trade is I like the international money. That's great. But I feel like I would have rather actually have gotten 2 less of these prospects and pulled in a top 100 prospect. We got in all these deals, we had Diaz as the only prospect that we got that was a top 100 guy. And I
get that.
I feel like you could have gotten a better haul, and maybe they weren't willing to part, but at the same time, look at all the pieces that the Braves had. You could have pushed and said, look, give me at least one top. Give me, 2 other guys in the single A or, low A, double A ball. Give me 2 of those and one top 100 prospect with $1.5 million in signing money, and I'd have been happy.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, but the thing is, if you look at the larger picture of what these deals meant for the team, right? So with all these deals in place, it really ultimately is saving the Orioles about $30 to $35 million in guaranteed money. We talked about the O'Day savings in itself. We got 15 prospects in exchange for 6 players, and not to mention that $2.75 million in international bonus money on top of that, which is in turn going to end up getting us more prospects. So you may see that 15 creep into the 17 or 18 numbers for 6 prospects. Now, granted, all those players aren't going to work out, and they're not all going to make it to the major league level. I get that. There's no guarantees with these guys. But all these talks and the word rebuild has been thrown around, right? And we talked about this on the Facebook Live post, but with a rebuild, you can go one of 2 ways. You can either go at it by throwing some paint on the walls, putting in new flooring in the house, maybe upgrading your fixtures and all that stuff, put a Band-Aid over it, make it look pretty.
See, I think a lot of people, we didn't talk about this on the Facebook Live, but I think a lot of people do look at that scenario, and that's where the argument comes in about, what is a rebuild, because I think a lot of people look at that as a retool.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. There's a difference, and retool isn't used enough, because retool is exactly that. It's basically throwing paint on the walls, upgrading the flooring, upgrading the fixtures. If you want to rebuild an organization, we're not talking about just rebuilding the major league system here. We're talking about rebuilding from the ground roots up. You got to strip this thing down to the studs.
Oh yeah. Yo, but you got to pull some nails out too.
Right. I mean, you do. You got to strip this thing down to the studs. And yeah, for me, being a Jonathan Scope fan, being a Kevin Gausman fan, being a Manny Machado fan, it hurt. It hurt to see some of these guys go. But if you're a realist, if you're an Orioles fan, and you don't want to go through another 10 to 15 years of misery, if you want to be competitive again in the next 3 to 4 years, this is what had to happen.
Yeah. I mean, Gausman was in holding back tears during his interview today. Yeah. When he was asked, Scope, Scope in his interview was kind of blunt. You brought it up on the live. Is he said they didn't offer me anything.
Yeah, and I think that was, to me, the biggest smack in the face of it all. You got Jonathan Scope, Manny Machado, both young players. Manny Machado being a once-in-a-generation type player, but Jonathan Scope, 26 years old, right? Even if you are going into that full rebuild mode, if a team is going to take 3 to 4 years to recoup, rebuild, and be competitive again, 3 to 4 years down the road, Jonathan Scope's still only 30 years old at that point.
Yeah.
Now you have a legitimate all-star second baseman, veteran leader in your locker room to bring these young guys along and kind of be that, that veteran presence. We don't have that. We're not going to have that. With the way that, if the Orioles didn't talk to Scope and didn't talk to Machado about the rebuild process and about extensions, that's going to leave this team high and dry of any kind of veteran presence moving forward.
And the one guy that people are all clamoring for that, you and I were scratching our heads a little bit, Adam Jones.
Yeah.
Duquette came out and said during the State of the Orioles address on Saturday to season ticket holders, which, my dad and I are, we sat there. He basically said this team's going younger. And he was asked the question of, would the Orioles be interested in re-signing Adam Jones? And he was, he walked around the question, but the answer was basically, we're not going to be looking that route.
Yeah, the answer was basically, we're looking to get younger.
Yeah.
Without saying, no, we're not going to re-sign Adam Jones. We're looking to get younger. So you take that for what it's worth. Here's the thing that kind of blows my mind about the Adam Jones situation is Adam Jones came into 2018 with the attitude that he wanted to win a ring.
He was running his mouth.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back to spring training and you listen to some of the interviews that he did, he wanted to win a ring. Winning a ring was the most important thing to him. Fast forward through this hellacious year, we go a couple weeks ago, and he's in the interview process, and he's talking about his future with Baltimore, and he himself said the perfect scenario would be kind of the Aroldis Chapman situation, where you trade him away to a contender, he goes and wins a ring, and he comes back and he signs a deal with the Orioles and retires an Oriole. Like, that would be the perfect scenario.
Yeah. So
what happens? Dan Duquette fields offers for Adam Jones. He gets a couple of offers, one of which that he liked with the Phillies. The Philadelphia Phillies are about an hour and a half, 2 hours up the road.
Hour and 49 minutes. I Googled it.
So he goes to Adam and says, look, you've got a chance with the Phillies to possibly win the division. Go in there and go after this ring that you so happen to, to covet. And look, I'm a huge Adam Jones fan. Big Adam. I love Adam Jones. I love everything he's done for the city. I love everything he's done for this organization. But they present him with this, and his answer is no, he's not going to waive his 10-5 rights, that he'd rather stay here with the Orioles, finish out the season, have a proper goodbye to his fans. And I can appreciate all of that. I get all that. He doesn't want to uproot his family, doesn't want to move. What is it? What's most important to you? Is the most important thing for you to win this ring, or is the most important thing for you to just stay here in Baltimore and kind of deal with what is a terrible year. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's a big head scratcher.
Look, I got news for you. He's not getting signed next year. And I think, the more I think about it, the more I wonder if maybe that was the question that he asked Dan and said, are you going to offer me, or are we going to potentially be talking in the offseason?
Right.
And Dan's response was probably, that's not the route that we're looking to go.
We're looking to get younger.
Exactly. And I'm sure Adam didn't like that.
Yeah, no, and I agree. But wouldn't that push you more to want to get out of here?
Yeah.
Now?
No, and that's where my head is scratching. Because and it itches because I'm just like, my brain hurts trying to think like, dude, what is your reasoning?
Yeah.
What is you're going to be on a bad team. This hurts you not only now for getting a ring. I hate to tell people, but this hurts Adam Jones' future as a baseball player. Because the guy was offered a chance to go to a championship team. And he said, nah, I'm fine with where I'm at. What's he going to do when the Orioles don't offer him it? And somebody else comes to him, like a Philly, Houston, whoever, and says, we need a center fielder. Or better yet, maybe it's we need a right fielder. What's he going to do? Is he going to retire? You going to be done with baseball now?
I don't know, man. This whole Adam Jones situation, like I said,
he's still got a lot left in the tank. Don't get me wrong, but it's such a head scratcher, especially when it's so close. I want to see some sort of wall. I want to see some sort of peaceful resolution with this whole thing because I don't want to see everything that Adam Jones has built up here in Baltimore with the fans, with the ownership, with the organization to go sour. Kind of like an Eddie Murray situation where things went sour late on his career with Baltimore. Like I don't want to see that situation, but at the end of the day, it falls on him.
It falls on him, right? If the Orioles presented him with this option to go to Philadelphia and potentially win a ring, like he so badly desired to do just a couple months ago, beginning of the year, it's all he talked about. I don't know, man. It's bizarre to me.
And nothing says that you can't go play for the Phillies and do charity work in Baltimore. Nothing says it. Period.
Yeah.
Well, you just can't be representing the Orioles as you're doing it, but
right. The team's had a good run, man. From 2012 to 2016, you got to remember this team won the most games in the American League. They've had a good run, So for all those people out there that want to throw Dan Duquette under the bus and give him a bad name, look, I am not a Dan Duquette advocate. I'm not somebody who has got his back or anything like that. I've been just as hard on Dan Duquette over the years as just about anybody else out there. But know this. His hands have been tied with what he can do and what kind of ability he has to properly run this organization. He has been very limited in what he can do in the player development area, in the scouting area, in the international market. His hands have been tied with that. Things have started to change and things have started to shift where ownership, Peter's, for lack of a better term, on his deathbed. His sons are now running the organization. His sons are now making the calls. And Dan's finally getting some freedom and the handcuffs are kind of coming off of Dan with his ability to do things he was once not able to do here in Baltimore. So I'm willing to give him another year or two on this leash to let him do what he's done successfully elsewhere, Montreal being one of them, and see what he can do. Now, like I said, we keep that leash tight. We keep it real tight to the arm. But you gotta remember, there's no big name GM candidates out there beating down the door of the Orioles for this job.
No,
it's not an attractive job.
By no means is it an attractive job, but I'm gonna kind of shoot your thought process down here, and I'm sorry.
All right, it's fair enough.
How are the Expos doing today?
That had nothing. That had nothing to do. Look,
if
94,
you talk to people, hold on. If you talk to people in Montreal, some people in Montreal say that that he was a source of that team leaving because they couldn't get fans in the building.
I don't know. Was it 94, the year, the strike year,
Strike
where they were?
Strike year was 94, yep.
They had Pedro Martinez, they had Dante Bichette, they had Vladimir Guerrero. I mean, their entire team was loaded. And did you hear all those names that I went down? Pedro Martinez, Dante Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero. What do they have in common?
Hall of Fame?
No. Think, what are the Orioles now going to be getting into? They're international players.
Guys, yeah.
Right. So he has once built an organization, a successful team. Forget the financials of that team. That team had bigger issues.
But was he overspending what the team was able to afford?
Well, maybe. And you know, I'm not saying Dan is a perfect GM. By no means am I saying that.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, well, by no means am I saying that. I just think that unless somebody comes beating down the door that is a more attractive GM candidate, I'm okay with giving Dan. Whereas 2 months ago, if you'd asked me that question, I said, no, get him out of town now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still torn on it. I think Dan's reaching his point here. I don't know if this is a McPhail situation where it's like, here, we're going to take the handcuffs off you a little bit more. Right. McPhail's way more qualified, of a GM than I feel that Duquette ever was, and a lot of what Duquette is quote unquote doing was a source of McPhail. So I don't know that he'll be back. I think that's a good indication that something's going to happen. Speaking of Hall of Famers,
well, we mentioned Vladimir Guerrero.
You have
Vladimir Guerrero's one.
Jim Tomei.
Yeah.
Both of those guys got inducted into the Hall of Fame this past weekend, along with Trevor Hoffman, Chipper Jones, Jack Morris, and Alan Trammell. A lot of huge guys there.
That's an amazing Hall of Fame class.
Yeah, and it's a classy class. For lack of a better term, these guys played with a lot of respect for the game, and a lot of respect for the guys that they played with and against. We talked about it on the live. The Chipper Jones story about the first time he met Jim Tomei was pretty good. Go look it up. I'm sure you can probably find it on YouTube now. Basically saying that he got him by the throat during a brawl and told him to chill out, and he did. Yeah. And they were friends ever since. Other speaking of Hall of Famers for the Orioles, I think we can't mention what's going on without mentioning that they did bring back Eddie.
Yeah.
Into the organization, a special advisor to Lou and John Angelos. I think it's going to be interesting to see what role he brings. They also brought back Brooks, who openly said, he's going to, he doesn't know his exact role, but he's going to be involved in the community a lot because, they want to get fans back to the ballpark and everything, which I think was a great move, bringing a guy like Brooks back. At 81 years old, he doesn't need to be making decisions.
Both Eddie and Brooks, I think, are going to kind of have those same type of roles within the organization. Eddie's actually done a lot of work in the inner cities with his own charitable foundation and whatnot. Just couldn't put any ties to the Orioles because of the fallout that they had and not being affiliated with the Orioles anymore, not working for the Orioles organization anymore. So now I think the Orioles are just looking at it from a marketing standpoint. They can actually put their mark and their name associated with this guy and some of the things he's doing.
I think Eddie also is I think Eddie's play will also be involved in spring training.
Maybe.
And will be a talent type person. Eddie's a raw, pure player, pure hitter. A lot of raw talent on that end. Always was.
Never know. Could see Eddie Murray in a hitting coach position at some point. At this point.
At this point, I don't rule anything out.
Scott Coolball.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I have to bring it up too. There's a lot of guys, that are on the ballot for next year, including Mariano Rivera, Roy Halladay, Todd Helton, Andy Pennant, Lance Berkman. Those are all the first year guys. Edgar Martinez hit 70.4% last year. Didn't quite make it, so this might be his best year for it. I think Holladay's a dunk. Rivera's a dunk. Pennant might be a dunk. And Berkman, I'm iffy about. I think Berkman will walk away with about 70%. But the other big guy that is expected to go in, former Oriole Mike Mussina.
Yeah.
Does he go in as a Yankee or does he go in as a Bird?
I hope he goes in as an Oriole. I hope that the fans out there can really put aside the separation, up the anxiety and everything that went along with Mussina, our prize starting pitcher going away and finishing his career out in New York. Guy was going after a ring. He went out there. I mean, granted, he didn't end up walking away with a ring, but went out there, gave it his fair shot, and he was a bulldog when he was here, and we haven't been able to replace him ever since he's left. I mean, that's been what?
Feels
15
like 20 years.
15 years ago, 20 years ago now. I mean,
something like that.
Yeah, if I hope he goes in as an Oriole, and I hope the fan base can embrace him again. I think it'd be good just as much as we're seeing with like Brooks and Eddie coming back to the organization. It'd be nice to see Mussina get back involved with the Orioles and the organization at a younger age. Let's not bring him back when he's 80. Let's bring him back now. So, I'd like to see him as an Oriole. I hope.
Well, Hall of Fame is kind of a theme and trend. We're just going to keep going with it.
Yeah.
Ravens have a Hall of Famer. You might know him. You might. I mean, have you ever heard of Ray Lewis? I mean, I don't know. Have you?
I think I might have heard the name once or twice.
Yeah, I mean, he's just thrown around a little bit. First ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, he's an okay guy. I'm excited to see this. I'm excited to see a speech. Is it going to be an exciting speech? My answer is duh.
Yeah. Look, Ray Lewis is Ray Lewis. His speeches are typically all over the place, and to him they might mean something, but look,
one time I had a cheese sandwich.
I love Ray Lewis to death, and he's definitely on the Mount Rushmore of Baltimore sports for me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm excited to see him get in, and glad to see him make it in first ballot Hall of Famer as he should. I'm hoping that Ed Reed's not far behind him as a first ballot Hall of Famer as well. So excited for it. But I think more excitement for me is around the game.
The Hall of Fame game.
The Hall of Fame game itself on Thursday, more so than the induction. Just because of everything, all the matchups and everything going into it. Obviously the big matchup and the thing that everybody's excited about the most is seeing Lamar Jackson, RG3 in the quarterback position, and seeing how different the offense might look with a mobile quarterback back there. I don't think we should get too far ahead of ourselves with this game. It's probably going to be a sloppy game. It's probably going to be a rather vanilla game as far as play calling and that kind of thing. We're going to see a lot of basic stuff, a lot of mistakes. We're going to see a lot of guys playing football that we've never even heard their names before, and players that will not be on this squad in a few weeks.
Yeah.
So don't get too excited for it, but there's certain things that I want to see. For me, I think the running back position is important. We saw, Kenneth Dixon's gone down the past 4 or 5 practices straight with an injury. So it leaves us kind of thin at the running back position. You got to remember Terrence West left this team to go to New Orleans. We got Kenneth Dixon back, but now if he's going to be out for any length of period of time, that really only leaves us Alex Collins and Buck Allen. And both of those guys are going to be utilized on a regular basis. So we've got to have that third or fourth back there. And right now, the only guy that I could see potentially making this roster if that's a big if, Kenneth Dixon, doesn't stay healthy, would be the guy out of Florida, Mark Thompson, the undrafted guy.
Yeah, you got to do something, but I mean, you also have to. People haven't been impressed by Collins. I mean, it's still preseason.
Yeah.
He definitely changed the tempo last year. To Ryan's point from the live, he turned it up to 11. Or we want to see him turn it up to 11. He was, might have been running on 9 or 10 last year. I think he can definitely hit a different gear. He's got the shiftiness to be able to handle it. It's gonna be interesting to see what happens in this game, what happens over the next few weeks, what route do they go. You mentioned Lamar and RG3. What role do they play? The depth chart came out on Thursday, the 26th, and it had RG3 at at second. You mentioned earlier that you didn't think it was a big deal. It wasn't. It's not going to be. You think by the end of the preseason that you're going to see Lamar, bump up to number 2.
Right.
But I think it's actually smarter to have RG3 at number 2 because it protects, your potential quarterback of the future. Joe still has, I think, 2 more years, but the Ravens can opt out after this year. So he's the guy that you are most sure about to be on your roster next year because RG3 was only 1 year, $1 million.
Right.
So he's the guy. Lamar's the one that you are most sure about, and you have to know. Okay, if Joe doesn't perform in the first 3-4 weeks, okay, maybe throw RG3 out there with a little bit of Lamar sprinkled in, so that Lamar can gain some experience, gain some traction, and be ready to take over this team next year if that's the route that they want to go. If it's not, and Joe has a good year, then yeah, he does become that second string. I think it's what we've been saying all along. You and I have both been saying they're going to carry 3 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
No ifs, ands. Yeah. No ifs, ands, or buts. I will be shocked beyond belief if they don't carry 3 quarterbacks.
The one thing that I've heard a lot of people out there kind of talking about, there's 2 ends of it. You got the people that are super excited to see Lamar play and want to see him play all 4 quarters in this game because they can't get enough of Lamar. Then you got other people on the other end of the spectrum that are a little gun shy with Lamar. It's not precious. It's they want to protect this guy and not expose him to injury. Here's my take on that. So we have an extended preseason for the Ravens this year. We have 5 games. Most preseasons we only have 4 right? Yeah. If you drafted Lamar Jackson to be your quarterback of the future, whether that's this year, next year, whenever it may be, he is your quarterback of the future. You cannot be afraid of injury day 1, day 10, day 100. Yeah. You got to get him out there. You got to
give him exposure.
You got to get him some exposure, and he's got to learn the offense. There's a lot that you can learn in practice, and there's a lot of things that you can see in practice. But at the end of the day, practice means nothing. It's what you do in game time situations, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I want to see Lamar play game 1, let him play a quarter or 2. You're going to see some things that he's going to need to work on, he's going to need to improve on. You've got that early in camp. So you start working on those things for the next couple of weeks. That way, come preseason game 4, game 5, you put him in for another quarter or 2 in those games, and you can see the progression of what is he
starting to put it together?
Is he putting it together? Is he trending in the right direction? Because at that point, if he's trending in the right direction, he's a fast learner, he's picked up on things, then boom, that moves him into that number 2 slot. Yeah. If not, then you need to cash in on that RG3 insurance policy and have him for sure make this roster as a number 2 quarterback.
Yeah. No, I see exactly where you're coming from with it. I think it's the exposure that scares me a little bit. We had talked about it originally, about when they talked about potential packages and everything. Okay, it's a high risk, but do you put a potential package in that puts all 3 of your quarterbacks on the field at the same time? It's high risk, but it's also got a high potential reward. Mm-hmm. You could wind up doing a lot with it. There was a video that they showed the other day of Lamar throwing a pass to Flacco.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see, how they approach it, especially since you have a lot of newer weapons, especially on the wide receiver front, that are going to be able to help these guys with the offensive line, giving a little bit more protection to Joe or whoever's back there at quarterback. So I'm interested to really see where those guys. The one guy I'm not interested to see in this damn game, Rashad frickin' Perryman. You gave this guy his roster bonus money already, and nobody wants to see him. I don't know one person that's going, I'm excited to see what Rashad Perryman does.
They might as well just piss that $600,000 away. I could have used that money and could have put it to much better use than this guy would if they just wanted to give away $600,000 because that's what they did at the end of the day.
I did the math on it. I'm not 100% sure because I don't. Do you know the full seating capacity of? I'm assuming like 70,000, right?
Yeah, it's about that.
Somewhere around in there, right? Mm-hmm. at $650,000, 70,000 seats, they could have saved everybody about $10 a pop on one game. Just one game. Just save it. Here you go. Instead of giving this money to a waste, we're going to give it back to the fans. We're going to give you guys all a discount.
$600,000 means absolutely nothing to them.
Oh, no,
it's pocket change. But yeah, I agree. I don't understand why they're holding on to this guy. They're doing everything in the world under the sun that they can. They're trying to expose him to special teams now.
Is this game make or break for him? Like
it's got to be. I mean, make or break for me was last year. You know, he came in, looked good in training camp, and everybody said, "All right, we'll give him one more shot." And what happened? Just in Brashad Perryman, form, he gets hurt. He comes back from injury, and
it still sucks.
He's got stones for hands. He can't hang on to anything.
I think Stones could catch more.
Yeah, probably at this point. I don't care what this guy does in this game. He can go out there and catch 10 passes for 150 yards, and we might go, wow. At the end of the day, he's still Brashad Perryman. He's going to go out there in the regular season. He's going to get hurt, and then he's going to come back and not know how to catch the ball again. He doesn't do well in game time situations. No. I understand this guy is a first-round draft pick, but sometimes you just got to suck up your pride and say, we screwed that one up.
Yeah.
And ultimately the Ravens did. That was a first-round bust.
Yeah, it happens. It happens, but you have, like you said, you've got to own that.
You got to.
You've got to own that. You can't keep dumping. It's not just money. It's time. You're dumping time, and you're taking time away from another guy. And one guy that's really stepped up that you and I both, are really excited to see, Tim White.
Yeah.
Who you mentioned. You said they've already put him as the punt and kick returner.
Yeah, he's earned the right for this game to be the first team punt returner and kick returner. But beyond that, I mean, this guy's caught everything thrown his way. He's done everything that they've asked him to do. He's multifaceted, like you said. He can play on as a wide receiver or in the return game. That's my problem with this roster. We talked about this last week. They've got 4 guarantees at the wide receiver position that we know are going to be on this team come day 1. 4. There's a probability that they're going to carry 6, maybe 7 wide receivers. Well, they've got 2 that they drafted this year in Jordan Lasley and Jaleel Scott. And we haven't seen enough out of them yet to be able to really make a decision one way or the other. Jordan Lasley is kind of up and down. You hear great things from big plays that he makes, and then when I went to practice, he dropped every kick that was his way. He dropped 2 or 3 passes during drills and stuff like that. So, Jordan Lasley is still a wild card for me. Jaleel Scott shows a lot of promise. Big, tall guy, lanky guy. Caught everything thrown his way when I was there. Needs some work on his route running and needs some work on getting away from corners and using his body and that kind of stuff. He's a bigger guy. Should be able to do that better. But that's going to come with time. So you got 2 wide receivers there that you drafted this year. That puts you at 6. That's before Tim White.
Right.
And then there's Brashad Perryman. Had Adebayo not gotten hurt, Brashad Perryman shouldn't even be on an NFL football field. He should be waxing cars or doing something else totally different. I have no idea. But yeah, I really, really hope this is the last time we see Brashad Perryman in a Ravens uniform.
Yeah, I hope so. One place that you can always, trade him. Let's trade him to the Brigade. I'll take Tompkins all day long.
Oh yeah, I'll take Tompkins all day long.
You think the Ravens would give him a look? I think they would.
Be interesting to see.
They could have Brashad Perryman. Speaking of the Brigade, the reason I brought them up, they lost to the Valor. Yes, the team that ended the regular season in last place, with 2 wins, beat the Brigade in the Arena Football Championship.
Yeah, I'm going to be really, really happy when this league expands from the 4 teams that it is now to the 8 teams that it is next year, hopefully, if all that stuff gets finalized, because there's just no reason a team that was 0-7 at one point and then finished the regular season at 2-9 should make a playoffs.
Yeah.
But when you're in a league that's only consisting of 4 teams and everybody's got to make it, and they signed a pretty darn good quarterback right at the right time with the last couple of weeks of the regular season, put together a pretty good run there. And hey, kudos to them. Hats off to them for the valor to winning the Arena Football League championship. Brigade just came out and were sloppy. Too many turnovers. Hippert, I mean, he threw for 5 touchdowns, but he also threw 2 huge interceptions, a couple of fumbles. I think really the biggest bright spot for the Brigade was Tompkins. I mean, he was huge in the return game. He had 1 return for a touchdown, another one that he just missed that he ended up fumbling right before the end zone, and they recovered it for a touchdown, so it worked out. But
right.
Yeah, that would be a guy that I would rather see in a Ravens uniform tenfold over Bashad Perryman for sure. But yeah, so that put a wrap to the Brigade season. And
they lost that game 69-55. Talk about defense. It was non-existent.
Yeah, there's no defense in that game at all. But in some bigger news in the DMV area would be around the Caps.
Yeah, man, big news.
Caps have done a pretty darn good job this offseason of keeping the pieces to the puzzle in place with, bringing back a lot of their own. And it didn't stop with the most recent signing of Tom Wilson to a 6-year, $31 million deal. Works out to a little over $5 million per year. I'm happy to see Wilson back with the Caps. You?
Oh, yeah. You got to have the enforcer back. You had to bring him back.
Absolutely.
I mean, we talked about it. He's like one side of the Bash Brothers.
Yeah.
He's just that type of mentality. You got to keep him. I think it was a great signing. The team has really kind of, I don't want to say stayed the same, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, it hasn't, for lack of a better comparison. But it is a team it's the Mighty Ducks. It really is. They win it, and then they come back with the same guys.
Yeah.
And you're like, how'd you do that?
Yeah, in an offseason that I thought there would be a lot of turnover. I mean, really the only piece that we lost this offseason would be our backup goaltender, Grubauer. I mean, there was a deal with the Avalanche, Colorado, sending Grubauer and Orpik to Denver, but Denver ended up cutting Orpik, and Orpik re-signed with the Caps on a much smaller 1 year, $1 million deal.
Caps were like, okay, you guys don't want him? Come on, Orpik, let's go.
We'll take him back at a veteran minimum type deal, and they got that deal done. I know you and I talked a little earlier on the live feed. One of your concerns now being that backup goaltender slot. There's some free agents out there that might make a little bit of sense for the Caps to go after, but I really don't think the Caps make that trade with Grubauer, even though he requested, he wanted to be out of there just because he wanted to start somewhere. I get that. But look, it's a business first and foremost, and the Caps aren't going to put their organization at risk or in jeopardy unless they had somebody in the wings waiting. And I cannot think of the guy's name. It's been bothering me all night, but they have a guy down in Hershey, a younger guy that they're pretty high on. And what a better mentor and somebody to learn from than Holpe. I think they'll bring him up versus looking at the free agent wire, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. No, I mean, I brought up a Halleck from the Islanders and Merzick from the Flyers. Halleck's 33, Merzick's 26. I think it does depend, and that kind of goes, with the guy that you're talking from Hershey is I'm sure young. The question is, do you go young? Do you go old? Do you have an experienced guy on the bench that's going to be able to step in when it is, when Holpe needs a break, when Holpe gets hurt or something like that? Or do you have a young guy who's maybe not as experienced but is youthful, has a little bit more flexibility, is able to jump in and be a little more spry and spur the moment and not have to, go through a little bit more preparations than an older guy might have to?
Well, just kind of looking at the spending spree that they went on this offseason and bringing back a lot of their pieces, I think from a salary cap standpoint, I don't know the numbers, but I know they got to be pretty close.
They got to be pretty close.
They got to be pretty close. I don't think they're going to be spending a whole lot of money on the backup goaltender spot, so I see them sticking young and bringing a guy up and developing him. Just my opinion.
I mean, I think that's the only thing you can do. So,
yes, sir.
It's time for the 2-minute warning.
All right, Scott. We had this rundown with Ryan earlier today on the Facebook live feed, but now it is your turn for the 2-minute warning, and your 2 minutes, it starts now.
All right, LeBron, that's right, the new Laker. He opened a school called the I Promise School in his hometown of Akron, Ohio, for at-risk youth, and they're supplying these kids with everything from backpacks to all the pencils and stuff, as well as a bike, and a food pantry.
Good dude, good cause.
It's a lot. It's a lot going on here. Eagles are upset over the new helmet rule presentation, and they were not happy with the referees here. The referees apparently confused them even more on the new rule because when they asked questions, the referees didn't have answers. Neymar came out and admitted that sometimes I do exaggerate in his Brazilian accent in reference to his flopping during the World Cup matches. I know you said you hate soccer players.
Exactly why I do not like soccer players.
James Shields, he might be a renaissance man. He changed his delivery and his arm angle and now has 13 quality starts in 2018. Sam Darnold is unhappy about his training camp holdout. His agent has been a part of that along with the Jets. The agent has been negotiating over wording on voidable guarantees in the contract, and he's ticked off about not practicing.
I think they did come to some sort of agreement later on today.
Did they?
Yeah.
All right. Bradley Lawler, former WWE wrestler and son of Hall of Famer Jerry the King Lawler. Basically, long story short, he committed a DUI. He got behind in jail, committed suicide by hanging himself, and was taken to the hospital where he was actually pronounced dead. Media is blowing up Baker Mayfield with RV piece at training camp, where resident veteran Drew Stanton told him he had to get an RV as a place of respite for the QBs. Wide receiver Stephon Diggs signs a 5-year, $81 million extension with $40 million guaranteed. Johnny Manziel is to start the CFL Montreal Alouettes on Friday, finally after 6 games as a backup. So close.
Almost
so
got
close.
it in there.
After 6 games as a backup with, I think it's the Tiger Cats, he was traded on the 22nd, and I'm sorry, it was 5 games. He was traded on the 22nd and is now going to finally be starting in the CFL.
Yeah.
He's still going to be a flop, I think.
But. Yeah. Once a flop, always a flop, especially with that guy.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, we appreciate you guys tuning in this week. Look, sorry again for the technical difficulties that we had earlier, but we're dedicated. We came back. We gave it a second go. Went much smoother, much easier. Be sure to check us out on the web at birdlandbs.com. Follow us on all of our social networks, not just YouTube, but follow us on Twitter at BirdlandBS, Facebook, Instagram. Look us up, BirdlandBS. You can find the audio podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, the TuneIn app, and Stitcher. So be sure to look us up and subscribe to your favorite podcast. For Birdland BS, I'm Fred.
I'm Scott.
We'll see you guys.
See ya.